All right, so the intervention that America had provided in Vietnam up to that point had been right through military, up to that point being 1961, the beginning of Kennedy's administration, had been financial, right? And some military advising and so forth. That's going to be increased dramatically under Kennedy. Okay? So, like, when Kennedy comes into office, there were like 1,000 American advisors in Vietnam. When he leaves office, there's over 16,000. Okay? So, in sort of involvement in Vietnam is incredibly accelerated by Kennedy. Why? Well, because he buys into this idea of the falling domino theory, that if you lose Vietnam to communism, the rest of the region could fall to communism. And again, remember, Kennedy wants to seem like a tough guy. And in particular, he wants to make Khrushchev think he's a tough guy, right? So he's really not going to, he really wants to be, firm against communism in Vietnam. At the same time, the Bay of Pigs invasion taught him how disastrous any kind of direct military intervention can be. So he's going to be resisting of that. So as he's increasing sending military advisors, increasing sending weapons and so forth to support Diem, he's going to be holding back on sending actual American troops or conducting an airstrikes in Vietnam. Okay, so he intensifies the same policy that had been going on under Eisenhower and under Truman. Now, he also faces a problem with Diem. First of all, he's friends with the guy, right? Diem had spent a lot of time in the United States, and Kennedy had met him and had known him. But since Diem has gone back to Vietnam, he's become more and more like, I don't want to say unhinged, but a little off, right? Kind of becoming increasingly authoritarian. And he basically is reliant only, Diem is reliant only on his brother for political advice. And he and his brother are ruling in a kind of very autocratic way, authoritarian way in South Vietnam, right? And the problem is, again, the same problem that Eisenhower faced, but it's more clear under Kennedy that Diem is a problematic figure, okay? But the problem is, who's going to replace him? Who's going to provide strong resistance to and opposition to the infiltration of South Vietnam by the North Vietnamese? So if you really are committed to preventing the spread of communism into South Vietnam, then you don't have a lot of options. You either continue to support Diem or you find somebody else, okay? And the problem was that Kennedy was distracted. A lot of his attention was going to other parts of the world, to Germany, to Cuba, right? To Latin America and Europe. So he's kind of neglecting what's going on in Vietnam. And that's probably the main failure that we could point to on the part of Kennedy. He doesn't put enough attention into the Vietnam question. It will become one of the most important questions of the 1960s, what to do in Vietnam, but Kennedy was not giving it sufficient attention initially, right? Because he didn't realize, and most of the other advisors around him didn't realize how important Vietnam was going to become. All right. So he resists direct military intervention, even though some in 1961 are urging him to it. He endorses two strategies in Vietnam in 1962. Counterinsurgency is one, and strategic hamlets is the other. So counterinsurgency is providing a lot of military advice, we might even say training, but also weapons and helicopters and all sorts of things to the South Vietnamese forces. And you had some special forces troops that were allowed to engage in combat in Vietnam, but very few of them actually. But the other thing that's happening is that they're allowing some people, I believe they're Americans, but at the very least they're giving these items to the South Vietnamese to use napalm and Agent Orange. Okay, and these are like, napalm is, explodes in fire or whatever. It's horrifying. And then, essentially, it's bad for the civilians, right? And they go on these search and destroy missions with the South Vietnamese troops, and they kill a lot of villagers, and it causes a lot of animosity against the Americans and the South Vietnamese troops. All right. So it's pretty unpopular in the South, especially, of course, in the North, but also in the South even. All right. Now, strategic hamlets was you would sort of create these little towns, and you would fortify them, and you would provide, like better, like plumbing or whatever, and you would also try to get people to buy into the anti-communist mindset, right? And to kind of get them to buy into, yeah, communism is really a threat, and get the people on your side. Now, the problem with these hamlets was that people had to leave their villages to go and live in them. So that's probably why they were not particularly successful. The people didn't really want to leave their old homes and go to these new hamlets, right? And so, but that's what they were involved in 1962. Counterinsurgency, working closely with the South Vietnamese troops, even accompanying them on their combat missions. And also that this sort of popular appeal, this strategic hamlet program, okay? As this is going on, and you're getting into 1963, Diem seems to be increasingly not making good choices as a ruler, okay? And so in particular, he's doing some things to alienate the Buddhists, and this one guy, Quang Duc, sets himself on fire in public, and he's a Buddhist monk, and he burns himself, okay? And the sister-in-law of the president, Diem, his brother, he rules with his brother, and the brother's wife is this very sort of outspoken figure. And she comments on the burning of the monk, and which is followed by several more Buddhist monks burning themselves. She comments that this is, a barbecue. And she's just kind of like dismissing it, and like clearly, and it kind of goes all over the news, and it seems like, who is this crazy lady, talking about the burning of the monks as a barbecue? And that's followed then by Diem and his brother putting in jail a lot of protesters, okay? And they arrested like 1,400 people. So all this looks pretty bad to the Kennedy administration. The Kennedy administration at this point is really like, we really need to just get rid of Diem. But we don't want to get rid of him. So this is kind of like indecision within the Kennedy administration. Now, there are those within South Vietnam, they're not North Vietnamese people, like they're not communists, but they are very unhappy with Diem, and they want to mount a coup to get him out of there. And the American ambassador in Vietnam, South Vietnam, is Henry Cabot Lodge, and he agrees. He wants to get rid of Diem. And he's kind of urging Kennedy, saying, well, maybe we should support this coup. And Kennedy can't really decide. He sort of indicates he wouldn't oppose the coup. So Henry Cabot Lodge tells the people that are organizing to take out Diem that, we won't stand in your way, certainly. Within Kennedy's administration, there's indecision about what to do. But they don't come out and say, don't act. What they don't realize is that Diem is going to be killed. They don't say, don't kill him, but the problem is they don't really give clear directions. And so the conspirators kill Diem and his brother. And this is very shocking to Kennedy. Okay, very, very shocking to Kennedy. And it's almost like at that moment when he hears about Diem being killed in this coup, he realizes how dramatically American policy in Vietnam has failed. Okay. And he realizes also that a lot of that is his fault because he hadn't been giving his full attention to it. Okay. His presidency is going to come to an end 3 weeks later when he's assassinated. Okay. But what we can say in terms of his legacy is that Kennedy with Vietnam is that he really intensifies American involvement in Vietnam, which is going to lead into then his successor, Lyndon Johnson, initiating direct military intervention